Galactic Unification, Chapter 1. The Shadows from the Stars, Part 4. The Fading Light of Hope. The initial shock of the invasion had given way to a grim, gnawing dread. The swiftness with which Earth's defenses had been annihilated was not just a tactical defeat, it was a psychological hammer blow. News, when it could be scraped together from the fragmented, dying whispers of the global network, offered no solace. Instead, it painted a tableau of overwhelming, systematic defeat. Entire regions had fallen silent, not just from communication failures, but from the sheer, terrifying absence of life. Broadcasts, when they flickered into existence, were often interspersed with the chilling sounds of alien weaponry or the panicked, static-laced cries of populations facing their final moments. Images, too, began to surface. Grainy, terrifying glimpses of alien machines moving through once familiar cityscapes, their forms alien and their purpose undeniably destructive. The initial defiance, the rallying cries for unity and resistance, began to feel hollow, a desperate echo against the insurmountable power of the invaders. In the sterile, heavily fortified bunkers of what remained of the United Nations Command, leaders of the fractured global powers convened in a desperate, hushed urgency. The holographic displays before them, once showcasing projections of economic growth and interstellar colonization, now showed only red zones, blinking indicators of lost territories, and the stark, unblinking reports of enemy advances. General Elias Vance, his face etched with exhaustion and the weight of unimaginable decisions, stared at the dwindling numbers on a tactical map of North America. "Our strategic reserves are depleted," he reported, his voice a low rumble of fatigue. "The orbital fleet is gone. Every major missile silo has been targeted. We have pockets of resistance, scattered and isolated, but no cohesive force capable of a sustained counteroffensive." The silence that followed his pronouncement was heavy, punctuated only by the rhythmic hum of the life support systems and the distant, muted thrum of what might have been alien orbital bombardment. Across the Atlantic, within a similarly reinforced command center, Prime Minister Eris Thorne's political counterpart, a woman whose name was once synonymous with diplomatic prowess, now found herself staring into the abyss. Her advisors presented grim assessments. "The European Union's combined military might has been neutralized," one stated, his voice devoid of emotion as if reciting a preordained eulogy. "Our attempts to coordinate ground defenses have been consistently preempted. Their logistical capabilities are beyond anything we can comprehend. They anticipate our movements, our strategies with an almost prescient accuracy." The implications were chilling. It wasn't just a matter of superior technology, it suggested an intelligence that permeated every level of their operation, a collective mind that understood humanity's strengths and weaknesses with an intimate, terrifying detail. The very idea of strategic advantage, of outmaneuvering an enemy, seemed to evaporate in the face of such overwhelming foresight. The psychological toll on the global populace was, perhaps, the most devastating weapon in the alien arsenal. The initial surge of panic had begun to morph into a pervasive, soul-crushing despair. Hope, once a resilient flame that had guided humanity through countless trials, now flickered precariously, threatening to be extinguished by the encroaching darkness. Every piece of news, every fragmented report, served to deepen the chasm of hopelessness. Stories of heroic last stands, once meant to inspire, now felt like tragic footnotes in a narrative of inevitable doom. The resilience of the human spirit, so often lauded, was being tested to its absolute limit, and many were finding that even their deepest reserves of courage were insufficient against the crushing reality of their predicament. On the ravaged streets of what was once Tokyo, the remnants of the Japanese self-defense forces, along with civilian militias, fought a desperate, brutal rearguard action. Sergeant Kenji Tanaka, his uniform torn and his face streaked with soot, directed his dwindling squad through the skeletal remains of a skyscraper. They were armed with everything they could find: salvaged plasma rifles, improvised explosives, even ancient projectile weapons, a desperate, chaotic collection against the sleek, unnerving efficiency of the alien invaders. "Hold the line!" Tanaka roared, his voice raw, as a squad of alien ground units, their metallic forms glinting with an unsettling luminescence, advanced with an implacable, silent march. Their movements were unnervingly fluid, their multi-limbed forms scuttling over rubble with an alien grace, their optical sensors glowing with a cold, analytical light. The air thrummed with a low, resonant frequency, an audible manifestation of their advanced technology that seemed to vibrate in the very bones of the defenders. One of Tanaka's soldiers, a young woman named Emmy, fired a burst from her salvaged energy rifle. The beam, a searing emerald laze, struck one of the alien troopers. For a fleeting moment, the creature staggered, its shimmering energy shield flickering. But then, the shield stabilized, seemingly absorbing the impact, and the alien continued its advance, its weapon humming ominously. "They're too strong," Emmy cried, her voice laced with despair. "Our weapons! They do nothing!" Tanaka watched as another of his soldiers, a grizzled veteran named Hiroshi, hurled a satchel charge. The explosion rocked the ground, kicking up a plume of dust and debris. When the dust settled, the alien troopers were still advancing, several of them now exhibiting minor scorch marks on their exoskeletons, but otherwise undeterred. It was like trying to stop a tidal wave with a sandcastle. The psychological warfare was as insidious as the physical. Whispers circulated amongst the surviving populace, rumors of alien technologies that could manipulate minds, of biological agents that induced paralysis or madness, of abductions for unknown, terrifying purposes. These were not confirmed reports, but the fertile ground of fear and uncertainty allowed them to take root and spread like a virulent plague. The constant presence of the alien fleet in the skies, a silent, overwhelming testament to their dominance, cast a perpetual shadow of dread over every waking moment. Sleep offered little respite, as nightmares of alien forms and agonizing destruction became commonplace. The very concept of a future, of rebuilding, of continuing humanity's journey, began to feel like a childish fantasy, a naive delusion in the face of an existential threat. On the lunar surface, within the relative safety of the Armstrong City habitat, Dr. Jian Li, the lead astrobiologist, watched the data streams with a growing sense of horror. The seismic readings from Earth were a constant, terrifying reminder of the ongoing devastation. His team had been studying the potential for terraforming Mars, a hopeful endeavor that now seemed like an absurd, almost criminal waste of resources, when their homeworld was being systematically unmade. "They're patterns of destruction," Lee murmured, pointing to a complex holographic projection of Earth's surface. "They're not random. They're targeting infrastructure, resource nodes, population centers, yes, but also historical sites, monuments, places of cultural significance." He zoomed in on a section of the projection showing the ruins of ancient Egypt. The pyramids of Giza, reduced to rubble, the Parthenon in Athens, gone. It's more than conquest, it's erasure. They want to obliterate not just our present, but our past, to ensure we have no foundation upon which to rebuild, no memory to draw strength from. The radio frequencies, once alive with the vibrant chatter of human civilization, were now eerily silent, punctuated by the sporadic, chilling broadcasts of alien pronouncements or the desperate final transmissions of overwhelmed defense forces. These transmissions, often picked up by automated deep space listening posts and relayed to the lunar base, painted a picture of widespread capitulation. Reports of entire cities falling under alien control, their inhabitants rounded up or forced into servitude, were common. The concept of national sovereignty had become a quaint historical artifact. The world was no longer divided by borders and ideologies, but by the stark, unforgiving reality of conqueror and conquered. In the depths of the Pacific Ocean, within a sealed, heavily shielded submarine designed for deep-sea research, Commander Eva Rostova and her crew monitored the unfolding catastrophe from a unique and terrifyingly isolated perspective. The crushing pressure of the abyss had, so far, protected them from the direct impacts of the alien weaponry, but the knowledge of what was happening on the surface was a constant, suffocating weight. "We're losing contact with Sector Gamma," a communications officer reported, his voice tight. Last transmission was an automated distress signal. Something about unidentified submersible threat, hostile intent. Rostova frowned. Alien submersibles? They've deployed underwater as well? The implications were staggering. The invaders were not limited to aerial or orbital assaults. They had mastered every domain. The oceans, once a vast, unexplored frontier, were now another battleground, another domain where humanity's dominance was being challenged and, likely, shattered. The psychological impact of this relentless, multifaceted assault was profound. The sense of inevitability began to settle like a thick, suffocating fog. Every victory, however small, felt like a fleeting reprieve, a momentary flicker of defiance against an encroaching darkness that seemed destined to engulf everything. The very notion of winning began to seem ludicrous. The objective had shifted, subtly but irrevocably, from victory to survival. But even survival was proving to be an elusive, perhaps impossible dream. The alien fleet was not a force that could be reasoned with, appeased, or even outlasted. They were an existential threat, a force of nature with a singular, devastating purpose. The fading light of hope, once a beacon of human resilience, was now a dim ember, threatening to be extinguished by the overwhelming shadow that had descended from the stars. The question was no longer how humanity would triumph, but if it would survive at all. The universe, once a vast expanse of possibility, now felt like a cold, indifferent void, and humanity, its fragile inhabitants, were facing an extinction event of unimaginable scale. The dreams of interstellar empires and a united, prosperous future seemed like innocent fantasies of a world that was rapidly and irrevocably ceasing to exist.